Hello and welcome to a new episode of Frankly Speaking, and tonight I have a very special guest, Smriti Irani, Union, Textiles and Women and Child Development Minister, Smriti Irani. Good evening, Smriti Irani ji, and welcome to Frankly Speaking. And I want to ask you, you were on fire yesterday in Parliament. You were taking on Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who said that he would use the time given to him in a budget speech not to debate the budget, but to debate the issue of farmers. I want to ask you, Smriti Irani ji, the farmers' protests have been carrying on for the last 76 days. Do you think the government has left it for too long simmering, and therefore politics is only just growing around these farmer protests?
I think that it was a tad bit unfortunate that the erstwhile Congress president did not even consider the fact that the budget that was presented by the finance minister was also dedicated to the farm and the farming community of our country. It is not a disappointment that is new to Indian politics that Mr. Gandhi refused to debate on merits of the issue. For instance, time and again, the agriculture minister has enunciated that could the Congress party please discuss the clauses which they found objectionable within the framework of the bill that was passed by Parliament. There has been no such forthright conversation by the Congress leadership. Similarly, including the 11 rounds of talks that the agriculture minister had with farm organizations across the country, consistently he has maintained a position: do discuss it clause by clause, tell us how we can convince you of a certain position, and if not, how we can help you reach a better position with the government. So much so that the Honorable Prime Minister himself in Parliament, in his gratitude speech towards the President of India, again articulated that we as a government believe in engaging with our citizens. We as a government have in fact established many means of engaging, including having a digital platform like MyGov, and the Prime Minister has time and again implored on the floor of the House, let's converse on issues pertaining to the bill, and pertinently let's discuss issues that Mr. Gandhi in fact outrages about. Unfortunately, Mr. Gandhi and his party have not been forthcoming on the facts. And that is why when you saw me speak yesterday in Parliament, it was a speech which emanated from a sense of outrage and disappointment.
Ms. Irani, I want to ask you, प्रधानमंत्री जी ने एक लफ्ज़ यूज़ किया है और उन्होंने कहा है आंदोलनजीवी इस देश में आ गए हैं जो हर चीज़ के लिए आंदोलन करते हैं. But many in the opposition have said that आंदोलन इस देश की डेमोक्रेसी का एक कॉर्नरस्टोन है. हमें अपनी इंडिपेंडेंस, आज़ादी भी एक आंदोलन से मिली थी. आंदोलनजीवी का जो शब्द यूज़ किया है, उसका जवाब राहुल गांधी ने दिया है कि आपकी सरकार जो सरकार है वो क्रोनी जीवियों की सरकार है. इस पर आप क्या कहेंगे?
You know, it is, Navika, it's a tad bit of a challenge when you have to deal with new euphemisms that come forth by an aged, albeit juvenile delinquent. And I say this with all due respect. Why do I say this? The Prime Minister on the floor of the House has been more than elaborate on the fact that there is a distinction that needs to be made between andolankari and andolanjeevi. There are some, and many a times on times now, you have had this discussion, who have made andolans a business. And it is those that the Prime Minister referred to who have not wanting to in any way support a dialogue democratically, not wanting to celebrate the potential of every Indian to engage in a deliberation, but instead use the cover of Andolan to have a process wherein their own vested interests are maintained. So I think that distinction was clearly made by the Honorable Prime Minister, but obviously it fell on deaf ears, especially with regards to Mr. Rahul Gandhi, because he does not speak from a position of truth, he does not speak from a position of conciliation, he speaks to disrupt, he speaks to promote the untruth.
Smriti Irani, aren't your words and expressions for Mr. Rahul Gandhi rather extreme? Juvenile delinquent is a rather strong terminology to use for somebody who represents and is a leader of the largest opposition party.
I think I have done it very respectfully. And I think my respect for Mr. Gandhi would have gotten up manifold if he had taken line by line of the budget speak and discussed it threadbare. This is not a gentleman who's not been admonished by courts in our country for using political slurs against the Prime Minister of our country. This is not a gentleman who has not been admonished by courts in our country for creating a political conundrum based on untruths. This is a gentleman who's had to apologize and withdraw from his statements. He's living from one political headline to another. The question that begets us all: doesn't the budget of our nation deserve a serious deliberation in the House? Shouldn't that have been the responsibility of Mr. Gandhi as well? The fact that he refuses to discuss a budget that will give a pathway to the next financial year, doesn't that tell you that this is a gentleman who does not take his political responsibility seriously?
Ms. Irani, he also used terminology.
It is the Congress party that seeks to project him as the voice of the Congress party.
He also used a new terminology. Well, not
so
that new, because Indira Gandhi, his grandmother, had used it in the past in another context, and he said, "Aapki sarkar hai, hum do, hamare do ki sarkar." He clearly referred to the fact that, as I can decode it, that Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi, Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi, Amit Shah on one side, and Adani, Ambani.
When a parliamentarian, allow me to just interject once. Tell me, when a parliamentarian is expected to indulge in a serious conversation on the budget, does these kind of political slurs seriously indicate to a mature conversationalist? बहुत आसान है रिटॉर्ट देना और कहना कि राहुल गांधी जी ने एक ऐसी पोजीशन ली है जिसकी वजह से 2024 में वो कहेंगे मैं एक और लोकसभा में मेरा कोई नहीं. But nobody gave that retort.
So you're saying that
because, as I said, as parliamentarians, it is our responsibility to debate on the issues which Mr. Gandhi seriously runs away from, as was evident not only from Parliament yesterday, but also in the farm laws was discussed. Was Mr. Gandhi present in the House?
So, Smriti Irani ji, you're saying that in 2024 he will be the lone MP of the Congress party in the Lok Sabha. Is that a challenge that you're giving Mr. Rahul Gandhi, and you think even Sonia Gandhi will lose her seat?
What you are saying is that he will be re-elected to 2024.
But you said, hum ek, hamara koi nahi. So I thought you were giving him the benefit of doubt.
Like I said, it is very easy to retort back. I am giving you a position which could have been easily restored to if somebody wanted to indulge in jingoism with Mr. Gandhi on an issue like budget. If somebody wanted to indulge in rhetoric with Mr. Gandhi, or for that matter, if somebody wanted to indulge in a verbal play with Mr. Gandhi on the floor of the House, the intention for the House to assemble is to deliberate on issues with regard to legislation, with regard to budget based on facts, or for that matter, question the government from certain positions which are deliberated upon or which are being evidenced. But Mr. Gandhi refuses to do any of it.
Ms. Irani, the duplicity of the Congress as far as the farm laws are concerned has been discussed, debated many a times, simply because their manifesto of 2019 had the same recommendations. Also, there have been reports submitted to Chief Minister of Punjab by Montek Singh Ahluwalia, which also recommend the same thing. Bhupender Singh Hooda also, had similar recommendations lying with him, and they wanted to do all of the same, but yet they turn around and call the BJP as pandering to a few corporates, especially the reference of crony-jeevi. Do you think this really is fair coming from Rahul Gandhi?
I think the problem is Mr. Gandhi presumes every entrepreneur in this country, or for that matter those who indulge in business or commercial activity, is a Robert Vadra. So when you look at everybody from that prism, obviously everybody looks tainted.
Robert Vadra has also...
So our country has had the rich contribution of stalwarts like Jamshedji Tata. Imagine if Mr. Gandhi was alive at that time? Would Jamshedji Tata have been attacked by Rahul Gandhi at that particular juncture of our economic life? So that is why the Prime Minister has said on the floor of the House, can you stop demeaning wealth creators of this country? They are hard-working individual taxpayers who create enterprise so that other citizens get employment. Is it fair to demean them? Yes, on questions of propriety, on questions of transparency, conversations should be engaged in. But just to jump from one political hashtag to another, or jumping from one political headline to create themselves as relevant entities to another, to bring down the entrepreneurial ability of this country, is that fair? And those who call us whatever jibe that Mr. Gandhi presumes us to be, this government under Prime Minister Modi shut down 3.82 lakh shell companies. The question again that needs to be asked is this: why were these 3.82 lakh shell companies functioning when the UPA was in power? And why did nobody in the UPA, including the Congress party that was leading the government, take any action against these companies?
स्मृति जी, आपने कल पार्लियामेंट में एक और बड़ा चार्ज लगाया था राहुल गांधी पर, और वो था कि उन्होंने जमीनें किसानों की हड़पी हैं। आप इन चार्जेस को सब्सटैंशिएट कर सकती हैं, और अगर कर सकती हैं तो अब तक
चार्ज नहीं लगाया,
आपकी पार्टी
सत्य बोला। आप ही ने सब्सटैंशिएट किया था नाविका जी, आप ही ने सब्सटैंशिएट किया है नाविका जी। मैं याद दिला दूं, टाइम्स नाउ की एक इन्वेस्टिगेटिव रिपोर्ट में यह मुद्दा उजागर हो चुका है। सम्राट साइकिल का मुद्दा पुराना मुद्दा है। ये तथ्य कोई भी इनकार नहीं कर पाएगा कि राजीव गांधी जी के नाम से ट्रस्ट, जिसमें 3 मुखिया हैं, राहुल जी, सोनिया जी और श्रीमती वाड्रा, इनके माध्यम से एक कमर्शियल जमीन खरीदी गई। वो जमीन जो किसानों से ली गई थी, इस आश्वासन को देने के बाद कांग्रेस सरकार द्वारा कि उसमें आप कोई फैक्ट्री लगाएंगे, फैक्ट्री चली नहीं। खरीद वो जमीन ली गांधी परिवार ने, एक एनजीओ ने, एक ट्रस्ट ने, जो कमर्शियल एक्टिविटी कर नहीं सकता। और जब वहां पे स्थानीय जो न्यायालय है, उन्होंने किसानों के फेवर में अपना ऑर्डर दिया, तो गांधी परिवार का ये ट्रस्ट कोर्ट गया किसानों के खिलाफ। ये तथ्य है, इसको आप क्रॉस मैच कर सकती हैं। दिस इज नॉट अ क्लेम, दिस इज अ फैक्ट।
Smriti Irani, yesterday when you spoke in Parliament, were you speaking as a minister of the BJP-led government at the centre, or were you speaking as a member of Parliament from Amethi who has defeated Rahul Gandhi? The reason I'm asking you this question is because many people see this as a personal battle between you and your opponent on the ground in Amethi, because National Herald, the Congress mouthpiece, also
battles are always fought between equals. Please, Navika, battles are always fought between equals, never unequals. I'm a self-made woman belonging to a lower middle class family who has risen the ranks out of pure hard work. And I would not like you to embarrass me by equating me to Mr. Rahul Gandhi. I'm extremely apologetic for being immodest, but truly battles are fought between equals.
I'm saying this.
And yesterday when I intervened as a minister, I spoke on the budget, which is my parliamentary right. Many a people speak on behalf of their constituency. I happen to be elected to the Lok Sabha, and I spoke on the basis of facts and figures based on the budget and the impact on the ground.
The reason I'm asking you, Smriti Irani ji, is because he was your opponent in Amethi. Now, you feel, he's not equal to you.
He was not my opponent. I was the BJP candidate.
But they've in National Herald put out Smriti Irani
This
missing posters in June last year. So is there a bit of a rivalry as opponents of two parties standing in front of each other?
I have possibly gone more to Amethi than the entire Gandhi Khandan in 50 years.
So you
in fact, I'm happy to share with you, I am about to establish my own residence in Amethi, the first ever Sansad to live there.
Smriti ji,
but this is not a battle for Amethi that was, as you have declared it. Allow me. This was not a battle for Amethi that was being fought yesterday in Parliament. That has been done and dusted. This was a proclamation on behalf of a minister in the government with regards to the budget that provides for sanitation, that provides for capital expenditure worth 1 lakh crore in railways, that provides for capital expenditure worth 1 lakh crore plus in the division of road safety and transport, that provides for Ujjwala Yojana, an addition of 1 crore women after 8 crore women have received the gas cylinder and clean cooking fuel from the government of India. I spoke from a position of these services that the budget provides, which Mr. Gandhi refused to acknowledge or debate.
Ms. Smriti Irani, I want to go to the larger picture of the international meddling that we've seen in recent times. But before I go to that question, I want to ask you, was your speech in Parliament impromptu yesterday? Had it been planned? Were you in the rota of speakers of the BJP? Or did you decide to intervene after you heard Rahul Gandhi?
I had absolutely no idea. I had absolutely no idea what Mr. Gandhi wanted to speak, because A, he's barely present, and B, he barely speaks on facts. And if you contrast that with what I spoke, I expanded on the numbers in the budget. But it's extremely intriguing. Why would you like to know about my prep, my position, when clearly, as I have articulated, it is my democratic parliamentary right to intervene. And if you contrast the two speeches, you will find that mine was based on facts, figures, and Mr. Gandhi was, as usual, foundational in terms of his rhetoric on untruths.
Ms. Smriti Irani, there is a narrative that is being built, and the Prime Minister referred to this as foreign ideology, foreign destructive ideology, a new FDI that's coming into the country. Do you think political parties in India, especially the Congress party and Mr. Rahul Gandhi, have added to the narrative that is now being set abroad? When tweets of Rihanna or Greta Thunberg came in, do you think our own politicians are adding to that narrative?
The position I'd like to take on this question, Navika, is going to be extremely personal. And I say this because this clarity needs to be brought out that I don't speak on behalf of the government on this particular question. Dial back a little and see when Narendra Modi, as Chief Minister of Gujarat, spoke of the Vibrant Gujarat Summit. Dial back to a time where there was a segment supported by the then UPA government at the centre which tried to bring disrepute to Gujarat, to Narendra Modi as Chief Minister, because investment was flowing into state. Now look at a position ever since India has declared itself as to be an aspirational economic power with an aim of a $5 trillion economy. A country which moved from 2013 from a position of fragile 5 to top 5 under Narendra Modi. Isn't it intriguing that it is now, when India gives the clarion call for self-reliance, that such templates are being seen in terms of narrative?
So you're saying that somebody is damaging India's chances to attract investment, become an alternative possibly to China, and our own political parties are falling prey to that or are hand in glove with that?
I will only say this, that post the pandemic, there has been a lot of investment that has been attracted into India because of many reform policies that have been undertaken by the Narendra Modi government. From the labour reform onwards to agricultural reform, onwards to also, I think we need to reflect on the national education policy that came to the fore after 30 years. The fact that a government of a 1.3 billion plus people not only took care of the challenges that emanated from a pandemic, but also incessantly applied itself to reform, I think is something that needs to be celebrated. Obviously, it caught an attention worldwide. The fact that India took care of its own and at the same time indulged in COVID diplomacy, supporting 160 nations across the world, is not a fact that should be ignored. The fact that today, when we talk about the Indian prowess as a nation that is looking at self-reliance, we had a Vande Bharat Express initiative by the Ministry of Aviation where 55 Indians from across the world were brought back to safety of their homes by the government of India, and 1 lakh foreigners were sent back to theirs. These kind of engagements, these kind of administrative marvels obviously have irked some. I will not here be irresponsible enough to say that political parties in India are not wise to what fact is staring them at the face. I think that they are being political about certain stances because it serves their vested interests. It is a shame that in Mr. Gandhi, as you have articulated many a times, in Mr. Gandhi, the Congress has found a leader who pre-pandemic went to a university in the national capital and supported Bharat ke tukde honge wala nara. It is a tad bit disappointing that the Congress party is now thrust with a leader who will question the Indian army with regards to strikes in enemy territory. So the fact that Congress has to deal with that disappointment is left to the Congress party. What we as a nation state, what we as citizens need to do is to be vigilant.
Ms. Smriti Irani, I want to ask you also the question on China that Mr. Gandhi has raised. And he's in his tweet and in his press conference earlier today has pointed out several inconsistencies in the government statement and the actual situation at the line of actual control. In fact, what he said in his tweet is, गद्दारों ने भारत माता को चीर कर एक टुकड़ा चीन को दे दिया. How do you respond to this statement despite the clarification and the statement made by Raksha Mantri Mr. Rajnath Singh on the floor of the House yesterday?
Despite you playing out scenes, visuals with regards to withdrawal, I will only say this, Navika, as we speak, Parliament is in session. Given that I am a cabinet minister, I will say only this, given my constitutional mandate, that irresponsible frivolous statements by Mr. Gandhi will be met with a responsible response from the government of India. However, गद्दार वो है जो देश की राजधानी में भारत के टुकड़े होने का नारा देता है.
मैं आपसे पूछना चाहती हूँ कि एक तरफ हम कह रहे हैं कि ये फार्मर प्रोटेस्ट में कुछ खालिस्तानियों का रोल सामने आया है और यहाँ खालिस्तान की सोचने वाले, क्योंकि कई ऐसे ट्वीट्स के जो हमने देखे हैं एग्जाम्पल्स, रियाना का ट्वीट या ग्रेटा थर्नबर्ग का टूल किट जिसमें मो धालीवाल एक खालिस्तानी नैरेटिव को सपोर्ट करने वाले एक मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट जगमीत हैं जो कनाडा के पार्लियामेंट में हैं और इन्होंने 26 जनवरी का एक टूल किट बनाया था और उसके बाद जो 26 जनवरी को कैपिटल में हुआ, रेड फोर्ट पे हुआ, लाल किले पर हुआ, वो हमने सबने देखा. क्या आप समझती हैं कि ये एक फॉरेन हैंड था जिसकी वजह से ये हुआ, या आप समझती हैं कि फार्मर्स को उकसाया गया अंदर से?
मैं इतना ही कहना चाहती हूँ कि जब इस प्रकार का प्रोटेस्ट पंजाब से शुरू हुआ था तब आपके चैनल पर भी इस गतिविधि को दिखाया गया था कि कैसे कांग्रेस की सरकार ने उसके लिए आंतरिक इंतज़ाम किया, प्रशासनिक इंतज़ाम किया. दैट बीइंग सेड, कोई भी हिंदुस्तानी, नाविका, उसकी चाहे विचारधारा कोई भी हो, कोई भी हिंदुस्तानी जिसके दिल में हिंदुस्तान है वो देश के तिरंगे का कभी अपमान नहीं करेगा. हम राजनीतिक कुरुक्षेत्र में द्वंद्व कर सकते हैं, एक दूसरे के साथ डिबेट कर सकते हैं, नाराज़ हो सकते हैं, लेकिन कभी भी कोई भी वो हिंदुस्तानी जिसके लिए उसका राष्ट्र सर्वोपरि है वो लाल किले के लहराते हुए परचम को नीचे नहीं उतारता, उसका अपमान नहीं करता. दैट बीइंग सेड, एज आई हैव सेड बिफोर, just introspect on the fact that the minute India moved from a position of fragile 5 in terms of economic situations to top 5 economies of the world, the minute that India under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi gave the clarion call for Atmanirbhar Bharat, why is it then those who want to break the nation are publicly displaying a toolkit?
Smriti Irani, I also want to ask you, freedom of speech is a big issue and freedom of speech has become the corner of debate. But when we see protests on the issue of CAA starting from Shaheen Bagh, then leading into the riots that we saw in Delhi last year, then coming on to these farmer protests, and I'm not even talking about the kind of narrative that was set about the abrogation of Article 370 on what happened in Jammu and Kashmir and demo before that. The fact of the matter is that somewhere there is a mistrust and there is a complete snapping of any communication lines between opposition parties and the government. Do you think any democracy can function with such mistrust between the two sides?
This session of Parliament, Navika, you saw a very emotive farewell given by the Prime Minister of the country to the leader of the opposition in Rajya Sabha. At the same time, in the Lok Sabha, you saw a deliberate defiance which was politically of interest to Mr. Rahul Gandhi, which was at display in the Lok Sabha. I think that एक पुरानी हिंदी कहावत है, ताली दो हाथ से बजती है. बार बार माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा विपक्ष से और बाकी राजनीतिक दलों से, राष्ट्र हमारा है, चाहे हम आज सत्ता में हैं, कल हम विपक्ष में थे, लेकिन एकजुट होकर कुछ ऐसे विषयों पर हम सबकी सहमति होनी चाहिए जिससे राष्ट्र के नवनिर्माण में गति मिल सके. लेकिन अगर गतिरोध का काम विपक्ष करता है तो आप कहिए कि जिम्मेदारी किसकी है कि संवाद टूटता नजर आता है, जर्जर होता नजर आता है. प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने यह भी कहा अपने उद्बोधन में कि एक तरफ राज्यसभा में राष्ट्रपति अभिभाषण के प्रति आभार व्यक्त करने के लिए कांग्रेस के वरिष्ठ नेता सम्मानजनक वहां पर विराजित थे, लेकिन दूसरी ओर लोकसभा में हुड़दंग मचाया कांग्रेस पार्टी के नेताओं ने. एक पार्टी, कांग्रेस पार्टी, जो अपने आप में अपने नैरेटिव को लेके, अपने अप्रोच को लेके डिवाइडेड है. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha of the Congress party does not work as a cohesive unit. You're asking me to take responsibility to speak from their position.
But Smriti Irani, even to the fact you make a reference to the Prime Minister's speech on the farewell of Ghulam Nabi Azad, leader of opposition in Rajya Sabha. प्रधानमंत्री जी की आंखें नम भी हो गई थी उस स्पीच में, लेकिन शशि थरूर ने कहा ये well crafted performance था. Is this total lack of
मुझे लगता है कि जिनका जीवन शायद परफॉर्मेंस पे उस प्रकार की पॉलिटिकली, ऑफ कोर्स इट इज, किसको हम लोग सराहना कर रहे थे? विपक्ष के नेता की सराहना कर रहे थे. गुलाम नबी आजाद भारतीय जनता पार्टी के सदस्य नहीं है, राज्यसभा के सदस्य हैं. देश के प्रधानमंत्री अगर उनकी सराहना करते हैं उनकी रिटायरमेंट में, शशि थरूर को पचता नहीं है, तो वो कांग्रेस का अंदरूनी मामला है.
आजकल सोशल
डिक्शनरी में नए शब्द खोजने की बजाय अगर थोड़ी ह्यूमैनिटी खोज लेते शशि थरूर जी, तो शायद उनको भी फायदा होता.
स्मृति जी, आजकल बहुत कुछ कहा जा रहा है और आप भी सोशल मीडिया पे बहुत एक्टिव हैं, तो मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूँगी कि ट्विटर को कहीं ना कहीं सेंसरशिप के दायरे में लाया जा रहा है. इस पर आपके क्या विचार हैं? क्योंकि लोगों का कहना है कि फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच, फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन और फंडामेंटल राइट्स के ऊपर ये एक और प्रहार है.
कौन से लोग?
ट्विटर पे सभी मिलते हैं. अब ट्विटर से चले जाएंगे तो लोगों की भाषा बदल जाएगी क्या?
उनके प्रति प्रश्न है मेरा. मैं वही तो कह रही हूँ, कौन से लोग, और उनसे प्रश्न है मेरा, क्या भारत का संविधान सर्वोपरि होना चाहिए या नहीं? क्या भारत का कानून सर्वोपरि होना चाहिए या नहीं? बस इसका उत्तर दे दें. उनके लिए फ्री स्पीच की परिभाषा क्या? जैसा कि श्री गांधी ने कहा अपने एक प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में, आग लग जाएगी हर शहर में. क्या हर शहर में आग लगाना उनके लिए फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच है? क्या राष्ट्र के टुकड़े करने का नारा देना उनके लिए फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच है? हाँ, कुछ लोगों ने कहा भी है that if I want to trample my flag, if I want to call for the disintegration of my country, that is the hallmark of free speech. But the Constitution says that free speech comes with responsibility. The two cannot be divorced from each other.
So Smriti ji, are you've been a professional working in the television world, in the film world. I want to ask you, OTT platforms should also be censored, social media should also be censored, you've been an INB minister, journalists should also be censored, news should also be censored. Where do you stand on all of these issues?
I think that since the Ministry of INB is currently formulating some kind of a structure for OTT, it would be a bit unpragmatic for me to speak on it. But I will only say this, and I reiterate what I have said before. Freedom of speech comes with responsibility. The two cannot be divorced from each other. Journalism and censorship might be a reminder of the 1975 era, but it is totally not, we see, functional in a vibrant democracy as ours in the year 2021. There have been many who have covered the news in print, in television, now who do so digitally, who are not fans of Modi. They thrive as much as those who now are not restricted to journalism but have taken positions as those who are policy specialists. The fact that we have a diversity of voices in our country is the vibrancy, is the diversity that we celebrate as citizens. But again, we must do so in the realm of law.
So Smriti ji, you know,
anybody who claims that the law can be thrown away, is doing the greatest disservice to freedom and transparency.
So Smriti ji, I want to ask you, when on social media there is one kind of a narrative, on the other hand we see people from Bollywood, the so-called favorites of the government, the cricket world, all coming out and tweeting in favor of the government, and then people begin to wonder whether this is orchestrated by the government. Whether this is, you know, also...
What do you mean so-called favorites of the government?
But that's what Twitter says, and you would have read all of these.
You will find a photograph of Lata Mangeshkar ji with Nehru ji also.
But is it a coincidence that all of them...
You will find a photograph of Shah Rukh Khan with the Gandhi family also.
पर सब एक साथ सोशल मीडिया पे आकर एक तरह के ट्वीट्स डालते हैं, तो ये एक आपका अपना टूल किट है, लोगों का कहना है. आपके क्रिटिक्स कह रहे हैं, उनको जवाब दीजिए.
भाई क्रिटिक्स का काम है कहना. आप उनको उनके कहने से वंचित कैसे रख सकती हैं? लेकिन ये कहना कि देश में कुछ विशिष्ट महानुभाव ऐसे हैं जो अपनी जिज्ञासा को, अपने समर्थन को व्यक्त नहीं कर सकते, और अगर उनका मत वो है जो राष्ट्र का मत है और टूल किट वालों का मत नहीं है, तो उनका अनादर हो, ये कहां का न्याय है? You are dividing the narrative between toolkitters and non-toolkitters.
No, the question they are asking is there a separate toolkit from the government or from the BJP? That's the question, in plain words.
That's why I said, Navika, that in plain words, what are the issues that we seek to discuss? If there are farm laws, let's start discussing it clause by clause. If it is the budget, let's start discussing it one budget line after another, one sector after another. But when you are bereft of facts to take a position from, that is when you indulge in these kind of political slurs.
So do you really believe that the Twitter has...
So a healthy democracy is where there is a transparent, healthy debate.
No, but then do you think platforms like Twitter, do you think they are really biased towards a left of center ideology?
I think that the IT minister has more than elaborated on the association between the government and the engagement, let's say, with a social media platform like Twitter. And I may not want to elaborate on it, as I said, because the session is currently on as we are recording this conversation. I will only say this, that those who come, as the IT minister has said, to the country to tap into the consumer base of our nation should not have the belief that they will run the country, should not have the belief that they are here to topple a political narrative. A platform which is authentic to discourse, which is authentic to free speech, is a platform that doesn't choose sides and which works within the realm of law. And the law here is governed and the law here is legislated upon by the Indian Parliament based on the Constitution of India. Anybody who presumes that they can take a position contrary to the Indian law is positioning themselves from a very, very sticky wicket.
I want to ask you the basic fundamental question on whether women should have the freedom to decide on who they want to marry or not.
As a woman who's married to a Zoroastrian Parsi, as a woman who's married under the Special Marriage Act, I will only say this: a woman has the right to choose anybody beyond the age of 18 to marry anybody that she deems fit, but she equally has the right to be protected by the law from defrauding or from forcible conversion.
Ms. Irani, you are also the Women and Child Development Minister, and therefore I want to ask you a question on a new kind of a law which has come out in at least 2 states, BJP ruled states, which is the love jihad, commonly called the love jihad law. I want to ask you the basic fundamental question on whether women should have the freedom to decide on who they want to marry or not. Or should religion come in the middle? Should other people in the society, the family, have more of a say? Or should women be the decision makers in this fundamental decision of their lives?
As a woman who's married to a Zoroastrian Parsi, as a woman who's married under the Special Marriage Act, I will only say this, that a woman has an equal right not only to choose her partner, but also the equal right not to be defrauded or forcibly converted. The law provides that protection. The terminology that you use for the sake of debate is not an issue that I would like to elaborate upon, because as I have enunciated, a woman's right is to choose a partner that she wants to spend the rest of her life with, but it's also her right equally not to be defrauded, not to be forcibly converted.
But who's supposed to decide that? Her family, the society? Because there are many cases that are registered, a couple just walking, back home from possibly a kind of a party or a kind of a meeting, were caught and put and taken to the police station. It's happened in UP. These kind of cases have come up. People have been arrested. Do you think whipping up passions
Navika,
on
in the
something
year
like
2009, in a court verdict from the state of Kerala, the BJP is not in power, neither was it in power at the centre. There has been a declaration from a judicious body with regards to the term that you use, love jihad, and the court had, in one of its pronouncements, and I'm subject to be corrected, said, and it was a Times of India report, I remember, said that there were around 3,500 to 4,000 such cases. Can the courts be denied such pronouncements on the basis of evidence presented before them? And that is why I reiterate, a woman has the right to choose anybody beyond the age of 18 to marry anybody that she deems fit, but she equally has the right to be protected by the law from defrauding or from forcible conversion. That is my position that I will consistently maintain. We have in our country a robust judicial system to seek refuge in and to get support from, apart from communities and families.
But in the meantime, harassment of youngsters in this manner, is that justified?
I will only say this again. There have been cases where women have come out in droves and said that they have been defrauded. Are you telling me that their pain does not matter? There have been women who have come out and said, especially those pre the law of triple talaq, who said that they were being duped into such marriages and left to fend for themselves. Will you deny them justice?
Well, Ms. Irani,
so that is why I reiterate. A woman has an equal law to be protected from being defrauded and for being forcibly converted and then dumped. And if you deny that woman justice, Navika, then you truly don't believe in gender rights.
Ms. Irani, I want to ask you today when we are speaking, there is a lot of buzz on social media, and there is a horrific incident that's come to light from Mangolpuri in Delhi. And this is being called the lynching of Rinku Sharma. There are versions that have come out while the police says there is nothing communal, but the family's statements clearly point out to some sort of a communal element in the killing of Rinku Sharma. I want to ask you, all those who were willing to believe the family in Navreet Singh, the man who was in the tractor rally of 26th of January, whose tractor overturned and he lost his life, unfortunately. All those people who were ready to believe the family of Navreet Singh on 26th January today are believing the police version. I want to ask you, is there something telling in this secular silence on Rinku Sharma?
Well, it's for sure, Mr. Sardesai won't be visiting the bereaved family. I will only say this, Navika. At a time when there's an active investigation, politicians might want to jump to the next headline. And I think as responsible citizens, we need to let the investigation complete. My condolences to the family of that young man, and I'm hopeful that justice will be done.
But Ms. Smriti Irani, there are being parallels drawn that this man was carrying saffron flags, believed in Ram Mandir, and wanted to collect chanda for the Ram Mandir, and therefore there could have possibly existed some communal enmity between the two communities.
You know the horrific scenes from West Bengal, where a BJP Karyakarta is hung publicly because he chants Jai Shri Ram. The horrific scenes from West Bengal, where women Karyakartas of the Bharatiya Janata Party are gang raped because they had the audacity to fight a local body election. When those scenes come to the fore, one does question the silence of certain media stalwarts who at one point in their journalistic lives did not have enough vans to communicate the tragedies that were being unfolding in a flood-like situation like Assam. So yes, I will here consider your position that there is a studied silence by certain vested interest, but let me reiterate, I am somebody who is constitutionally mandated to take a principled and a very responsible position. I will again say my condolences to the family, and it is my belief that justice will be done, and I will resist the temptation to jump to a headline.
Well, thank you very much, Smriti Irani. I hope you will break your silence when the investigation goes forward and we have a position where we can actually speak on the facts and the investigation giving us more details on Rinku Sharma's murder stroke lynching. But till then, of course, we will continue to question the secular silence of all those who have so many tears for akhlaq should be there. But the question is, why not for Rinku Sharma? Thank you very much, Smriti Irani, for joining me on Frankly Speaking.
Navika, I'm grateful that you called me today, but I would leave you with this particular sentiment of mine. There are many people who chant Jai Shri Ram, knowing that they will be in peril. But they do so not because they believe in politics. They do so because that is their Shraddha. And it is dedicated to them that I will sign off saying Jai Shri Ram.